Shalom, welcome back. Now we're going to be doing lesson number 4. Here in this lesson, we're going to be learning how to negate a verb and how a verb is negated. And we're going to see also in the beginning, as we look at here, we have the Vav conjunction being added to a word. Remember, the Vav by itself means and also can mean but. So when we're looking at this, we have to know the fact that we're having basically two words that we're going to have to translate that are combined together, because in Hebrew, Vav always is assimilatedly added to every single word that it's attached to. Okay? So let's look at this right now. So here we have now the Vav conjunction. This is a conjunction. What's a conjunction? Remember, conjunctions are words that are added to connect elements of a sentence together. Okay? So the conjunction Vav, and every time you ever see the Vav in front, Vav just means basically two things, either and or but. That's it. There is no other meaning for Vav. So the minute you see and, or the word Vav I should say, you know the word and or but is used here. So next one we have is the negation. What is negation? Negation means that you're saying a negative statement, okay? It's like the equivalent of when you say, for example, I won't. Won't is a negation. I can't. Can't is a negation. He didn't. Didn't is a negation. And so we have to kind of understand the fact that when we're talking about the word lo, how are we going to translate it? It's just going to be simply thinking lo means to negate something. So if I know I said hear, like the word shema. Shema means to hear. Here it's in the third person masculine singular form. So now we're looking at this word as he heard. Okay? He heard. Velo shema, I know that it's saying something didn't happen, because lo is a negating adverb. And so therefore, when I see lo before shema, if it means he heard, the opposite is what I'm going to be reading and translating. So lo shema, you're going to say he didn't hear. Alright? He didn't hear. Shema, he heard. Lo shema, he didn't hear. Okay? Now we have our next one. Here we see in front, we see the hey attached to a noun, melech. Melech is the word for king. So here we have the word king, and we have the hey, which is what? It's the definite direct object marker. This always tells me that whenever a hey is attached to any noun, we're talking about a noun that is definite. So it's definite, which means what? Well, we have two problems here. Number one, when we know something's definite and we know that the noun it's being attached to is a generic noun that was definite by the hey, we know that there's only two possible things that could ever be such a case. Number one, the definite, when we see that this is a noun and there's no noun preceding it, the first question we're going to ask is this the object of a preposition? If I don't have a preposition in front of it, then I have one more choice. Is it the subject of the verb? Because the only time we're going to see hey in front of a noun is because we're either going to be the object of a verb or you're going to be the subject of the verb. There's nothing else that you have, because we're looking for what is here. If we see no nouns and we know that we have either a verb or a preposition, this is the only two things that could possibly be. Because this is a verb, and we will write this down here, verb, then we have to say that hamelech is the subject, Hamelech is the subject. So that means, instead of saying he didn't, I have to change this, because now Hamelech is the third person subject. Okay? So now it's the king. didn't hear. Okay? Now, we're going to see how important we understand the word Shema. Okay? What does this mean? Let's look at the next part. L. We know L is the preposition which is the word for to or unto. Okay? He didn't hear. Now, this doesn't make sense. Notice the word L means to or unto. He didn't hear to? That doesn't make any sense. Remember, the verb Shema has two possible meanings. To hear or to listen. Okay? It's interesting how we can start seeing the fact that in Hebrew, we have one word that incorporates two possible conceptual points. It could mean hear or listen. And in Greek, for example, there's a word that we use, heteros and aglo. In Greek, the word heteros and aglo is translated another, but they don't mean the same. Okay? You see, if you wanted an apple and this guy was going to the grocery store, all right, and you wanted to ask him for another apple, you would say an aglo. Give me an aglo, and the word aglo would mean another of the sort of what you're referring to. However, if you were sitting at the table and you ate an apple, but you didn't want an apple, you wanted a banana, then in Greek you would say the word heteros. And heteros would be the Greek word you'd be utilizing. And so here in Greek you find that the word is separated into two different definite points. And it depends on what contextual way you're going to speak by which point you're going to use. And so therefore, if you're going to say another of a different sort, you would say heteros. If you're saying another of the same sort, you would say aglo. Well, in Hebrew, we have one word that expresses two possible concepts. In English, we divide it up into two. We said either hear or listen. And so we're having to see the fact that in English, we're noticing the fact that one word in Hebrew incorporates these two possibilities. Whereas in Hebrew, for example, the word for another would be acher, okay? Acher is the word for another. And so when a person says the word acher, he's utilizing the possibility of context to define whether it means another of the same sort or another of a different sort. And this is the same thing we're going to find here. The word Shema is expressing the word by which the context is defining the usage. And so here we see Shema is being used here as to listen and not hear. And so here we would see that this is not the proper translation because the context is defining which contextual meaning of Shema we have to utilize. Next, we have the next part, which is ha'am. We know that if we point here, we see the hey. The hey is the definite direct object marker. We see that the hey is not the object marker, it's the definite article. It's the definite article that attaches to the noun, which tells me that this noun is definite. And so now that we see that the noun here is definite, I know that if I look at this, that this noun here, because it's definite, I know that we have two possibilities, as we learned beforehand. Either it's the object of a preposition, or it's going to be the subject of a verb. So let's look what's right behind it. L. L's the preposition. So now that I know that I have my preposition here, I have here my object. So the object of the preposition is here, and so therefore my last thing I have here, he listened unto the people. So what happened? V'lo shema, the king didn't listen, el ha'am, unto the people. And so I'm looking at the fact of, here's the things that we looked at. Here's the things that we had to focus on. What were they? Number one, the vowel conjunction we know means and. And so now when I translate this, I have to take the word the, make it a smaller case, and add my and in front of it. The, and, lo shema. The king didn't, and notice that word order is a little different in English than we have in Hebrew. Because we're saying lo shema, and afterwards hamelech is used, okay? So here we have to kind of flip the word order a bit, because here it's saying he didn't listen, but we have to say who. This is what we call a transitive verb. A transitive verb always requires a who didn't listen, okay? And there we're going to find an object is going to be placed after a transitive verb. So, Hamelech lo shema. The king didn't listen. He didn't listen to what? And whenever we see the what, this tells me definitely that I have a transitive verb, because now I'm finishing the statement by the what? El ha'am, unto the people. I know I said that backwards, and I'm sorry for that. When I said lo shema hamelech, the shema is a transitive verb because it has a what. A what is always defining when we have a transitive verb. This means the verb requires an object to complete the sentence. Okay? So forgive me for that part, but we can go forward from here. So here we have this fact that we know that here the negation is always just going to be the opposite of whatever the verb state is. So if I see the word shema, listen, what's the opposite of listening? Not listening, okay? Think of that every time you translate, because instead of saying lo means don't, which I think is a horrible way of forcing people to think don't, okay? Or not, okay? Lo is not that way, okay? We have to think of lo as just, it's a negation. And so what's a negation? It means whatever's being said, think the opposite. If he ran, think he didn't, okay? If he ate, think he didn't. If he slept, think he didn't sleep, okay? Just think of the word when you're thinking of lo as negating and making the opposite statement of what is being said here, okay? And this is perfect with helping you understand how this thing's going to function with relationship to this thing. Now we need to focus on some more elements here. So what's the other element we're going to focus on? Well, here we have to now go and look at the fact of the verb. Remember, I told you there are different classifications by which different verbs are going to fall underneath, okay? In lesson number 3, we had the word vayelech, okay? And vayelech, we said, here was our vowel conversive, over here was our pronoun, and what do we have left? We had lamed and chaf-sofit. And so here, we said that there was something wrong with this, and that was there was something missing. And I said, what was that thing missing? We went through all of the different possibilities, and then finally we said, hey was the actual missing. And so this hey made this verb special. Which means what? Which means halak doesn't follow the main categorization of the vocalizations that I'm going to find in my average everyday charts. This is why I made the halach chart by itself. It's a part of the special charts that are in the booklet of all the Beninnim charts, and you can go through this and literally find the specific chart there. Here we have another special thing going on here. However, this special thing is not as special as halach because it follows under a category of verb classification, and that is our verb shema. If we look at our verb shema, which means to listen, okay? We have shin, mem, and ayin. Here we have in the third category, we have ayin is placed at the end. This means when I'm looking for the vowelization of this actual root, I have to use the vowelization that's called the ein, or the chet guttural, okay? So this is the third ein and chet guttural. All right. So this is the ein and chet third guttural, which means all verbs that have ein or chet at the end have to be vowelized using the ein chet third guttural chart. And that's because when we're putting it into a certain form, a vowel is required because of the guttural. And so therefore when other letters are used which are not gutturals, they don't require it, where this one does because it's a third guttural. And so we have to utilize this specific chart. And so if you actually downloaded the chart that I have on the website, you'll find all the vowelizations that are used for the third ein and chet guttural. And this is important because when we're actually utilizing this very thing, we're having to understand that when I put it into these charts, then I can see why when I put it into the future form, because the future form where this is going to be basically affected the most. Because when I see this in the past tense chart, it follows all of the main basic forms that we find for pa'al. Okay, all the forms are all the same. Okay, they're all the same vocalization wise. There's very few minute problems that are taking place within, but they're predominantly all the same vowelization wise. So this is important to understand here. And so we have to know and understand the fact of how this is and what's going on in this place. And we also have to memorize the fact of when we're looking at the word Shema, okay, that if we were to go and look at our chart, okay, the chart would tell me that this word, Shin, Mem, Ein, is the third person masculine singular form. If I want to put onto the chart, what would I find? I'd find, well, if I added a T at the end of this, I'd get Shabati, which is I heard. If I took away the T and made this a kamatz, it's Shamata, you heard. If I took away the kamatz and added the two dots, it's Shamat, you heard feminine. If I added the hey at the end, then I vowelized this differently. I have the word Sham'a, she heard, okay? And so I'm learning by utilizing the chart, I'm learning how to identify what this verb looks like in all of its past tense forms, and I'm able to help quickly identify the verb form that I'm using here. This is what's going to help me really. You need to understand the verb charts are essential. If you want to learn verbs, you want to understand verb Hebrew, you want to understand how to know future, past, you want to know what verb form you're looking for, get really acquainted with the verb charts. They're your best friends because they're going to help you quickly identify first person, second person, third person. They're going to identify future, they're going to identify past tense, and this is so vitally important when we're utilizing this. Without it, it's just not really ever going to help me understand something here, okay? It's really, I'm going to lose a lot of information by not focusing on it because it's necessary. Now, let's look at the word ha'am. Here we have the word ha'am. Ha'am is comprised of, remember, two parts. The hey, which is the hey article, which is making a noun definite, the patach, and of course my dagesh. Now ein, because it's guttural, cannot take the dagesh, and so what's happened is I'm deleting this, but I'm compensating it by making this a kamatz. And so the same thing happens here. I make this a kamatz. So when I'm putting these two together, I'm getting ha'am, which is exactly what we see here. And so that's why you're going to see sometimes there's a vowelization differentiation. Don't get too freaked out, okay? you know, the reason why there's a patach versus the kamatz, whenever you see a kamatz versus a patach, or a patach versus a kamatz, or kamatz versus patach, there is no special differentiations, okay? When the Masoretics were creating the vowel looks, okay, remember these are all vowel sounds, okay? When they were making the vowel looks, they said, you know what? We want people to identify the differentiation between a verb and a noun, okay? Because if somebody were to see in a written form of the vowel something that looked like the opposite, they might get confused. What if Shema was the word for hearing, and I use the same vowel looks for the verb form to hear or listen, okay? So this, let's say this meant heard or listened. They said, we don't want to confuse people and think, well, maybe, is it a noun, is it a verb, I don't know. And they'd fight over the context to figure these things out. So they said, you know, we're going to identify the verb form to be this, so that when you see it, you know that that's a verb and that's the verb form. But if we were using a noun, it would look something like this. And so therefore you were differentiating between the noun Shema versus the verb Shema. And that's what they did to make it very easy for people to identify verbs and nouns and differentiation of nouns that exist. And I think it's important just to understand that concept, because sometimes it gets really confusing and you can sit there and you're like, oh, I don't understand this, I don't get why this is this way, this doesn't really seem to fit the picture of what I'm doing here. But we have to understand and know what's going on here, okay? So now we have to focus on just a little review here of what we learned in the lesson beforehand. And that's the fact that we need to start going through in this lesson, and we have to start looking at the differentiation between PL and Pa'al, okay? So what's the difference between PL and Pa'al? If we were to put PL over here, and if we were to put Pa'al over here, I want you to notice very quickly the vowelizing of Pa'al. The patach and the kamatz. The kamatz is first and the patach is last. Here we see the hirik and the tzere, okay? If we were to go through and to start taking these charts and to separate, for example, and start identifying the differentiation between one chart and another. The thing that we would start finding is, when we're going through these things, is we'd start looking for the fact that, hey, I know that the Pa'al form has a different vowelization than the PL form. And the PL form has a different vowelization than the Pa'al form. And when we start looking at the Pa'al versus the PL, we start finding this, okay? I'll use the word Shema here. So here, we're just going to use the past tense right now. Shemati. Shemata. Shemat, okay? I want you to take your actual verb sheets that I have, which is going to make it 1,000 times easier than the way the book was trying to set this up. And I want you to take one Pa'al sheet and print it off. And I want you to take one PL sheet and print it off. And when you take the PL sheet, I want you to take these two and just practice taking the first verb we have, which is the word Dalid, Bet, Resh, and take the word Shema, Shin, mem, ein. Remember, you need to use the ein third letter root chart, and here we're just using the PL, which is going to be the first chart for PL, because the bear is a PL that has literally all the roots together. Okay? So here we're going to say, for example, we'll start with the Barti. Okay? D. Notice we have a dot. That's the second root letter, which tells me that this is the PL form. This is vitally important to know, because when I use this, I have to understand the fact that this usage here is going to indicate to me that this is the PL form. PL forms have the dagesh in the second root letter. Okay? So, dibarti. So, dibarti is my first vowelization. The next one we'll use once again. Dibarta. Dibarta. And dibart. Notice that we have the same kind of setup with regard to t, ta, t. T, ta, t. That holds the same format. The only differentiation is the vowelization changes a bit, and we have a dagesh in the second root letter, which indicates this is the PL form. This is what you're doing when you're separating the fact of what's pa'al, what's PL. What's pa'al, what's PL. PL, if I see dagesh in the second root letter, bam, I know this is a PL form. If I don't see the dagesh and I see normally this, I know it's pa'al form. Okay? And this is you're going to notice the differentiation as we grow along to the other forms, but these are the forms that you have to know for certain as you're going through this part, because it's so important to identify these parts here, because as you identify these basic forms, which, like I said, you want to take the sheet and you want to literally start working through this actual diagram, because you want to start playing with the roots. You know, the book was horrible. The book never gave you how to vowelize the roots. The only vowelization you have is at the very back chart, and they're all roots that already have vowels and already have consonants smacked together. That's why I made the charts as simple as possible, so that you could just fill in using the roots and you already have the vowelized printed. So all you're doing is just filling in the sheet. So if you think about the sheet that I'm giving you, this is basically what your sheet looks like. Very simple. And I'll go that with all of these to give you a good, strong understanding of how these charts work, because they're just perfect. I mean, they're meant to help you learn Hebrew quick and not get caught up in all the mumbo jumbo of trying to fight through a root letter to figure out the vowel point and where the vowel was, what the vowel looks like. Okay? All you have to do is put daled, bet, resh, and you have dibarti. The same thing. Daled, bet, resh, dibarta. Next thing. Daled, bet, resh, dibart. That's the way that you want to understand, because now you're learning how these vowels work and what they look like. And like I said, use your flashcards, okay? Put on your flashcards and put the future and put the past tense on the flashcard, so that your first flashcard and the front just looks like this. It's just the root. Daled, bet, resh. And then when you flip the card over, you have the past tense, dibarti, and then you wrote in I spoke, And then you have, of course, underneath that, edaber, I will speak. All right? And so that you can practice your past and future immediately. This is a great way of doing it. Matter of fact, I even think some of the better cards that you can get is the 5x8. They're the bigger cards rather than the 3x5s. The 5x8 cards are great because it really gives you the ability to write down a lot more room. But if you want to have something quick and easy, 3x5 cards, write this, write the translation underneath it, and start practicing. Dalet bet resh. You know, if you already know, what one is, maybe use the first one, dalet bet resh, with the root meaning on it, and then after that you just use the word dalet bet resh and just practice going to speak. Flip it over, edaber, I will speak. Dabarti, I spoke, and just practice doing that. Because this is vital. If you want to understand these things, this is essential. You have to understand this part. Okay? And the second thing you're going to find here is going to be asking you how to identify the fact of what you're going to be doing, which is something have a prefix vav to it. Okay? Which means we're looking at the fact that the vav, like vayomer, alright? Remember, we said prefix always means what? Something's been added to the front. If it's affixed, we're talking about something that's been added to the end. We know that if it's affixed, we're talking about past tense. If it's prefixed, we're talking about something that's in the future or something added to the front. And so in the next diagram, you're going to be basically breaking apart the difference of between, is something a prefix, is something an affix, is it pa'al, or if it's pl. And this is going to be important to just go through and identify what's going on here and what's happened. Is something been affixed to it, or has been something been prefixed to it? And this is going to help you memorize the fact of going, okay, listen, something that's prefixed, this is talking about something that would be in the future. If it's affixed, it's been something that's in the past if it's a verb. If it's prefixed, it could be something that's added to a noun, such as a definite article. If it's affixed, it could be a pronoun, which we haven't gotten yet, but we'll get there. It could be a pronoun that makes the noun possessive, okay? And then, of course, lastly, you have your translation, by which, if you have gone over your vocabulary, you will be able to translate these words and identify the grammatical elements here that you've seen in all of the lessons we've taught, from lesson number 1 all the way to lesson number 4. And this is a real important part, because as you go through this, and as you go through these lessons, if you have to go back and look at lesson 1 again, and listen to lesson 1, and go through the fact of what was lesson 1 about, what were you learning, what was it supposed to be that you're supposed to focus on, and did you miss something? Go through these different lessons. They're following the book step by step. So if you buy